was just tinglies of electrical impulses. It was all slightly unbelievable.
Can somebody give me a mic? And would somebody please turn off the fucking reverb? Thank you. Narration, take one. When did the 60s begin? That might seem obvious. Everyone remembers them this way. But really, the early 60s looked like this, a black and white picket fence world still stuck in the 50s. But in 1964, this man, Ken Kesey, took an LSD-fueled bus trip across the country that changed everything. Kesey lit the fuse for the explosion of the 60s. Who was Ken Kesey? He looks innocent enough, doesn't he? Not like the kind of guy to take massive amounts of LSD. While in college, Kesey married his junior high school sweetheart, Faye. As a college athlete, Kesey showed promise both as a football player and a wrestler. Kesey also liked performing as an actor and a ventriloquist. He loved the magic trick of speaking through other people. Ken, when did you decide to become a writer?
I never said I wanted to be a writer. I'm a magician. Writing is just one of the tricks that I do.
And quite a trick it was. By 1964, at the age of 29, Kesey was one of America's greatest writers. His first two published novels were One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and Sometimes a Great Notion. Yet, at the height of his success, Ken traded his typewriter for a movie camera.
If Shakespeare were writing today, I don't think he would use a quill pen. So I started going out and taping with tape recorders and filming to see if people talk like they do in novels, and they don't.
With a group of friends, Kesey set out to make a road movie. Their trip would become a legend, but few ever saw the film. There were technical problems. Their voices are on audio tape, but almost never in sync with the picture.
Again, the transmission of a 27 Buick into second gear around the corner at 34th and Deer, or was it Clark? Somewhere along here.
Here's a scene with Neil Cassidy, the famous speed-taking real-life inspiration for Jack Kerouac's famous novel, On the Road. For 40 years, Kesey and his friends edited the film, never getting what they wanted. Then it was boxed away, forgotten, collecting dust. Now, we're going back to the vaults, using the rare film and audio interviews of Ken and his friends to bring the story back to life.
Let's go record!
Unnecessarily, Mr. Cassidy proceeded north.
Correct, children, to the left, Breck. As you journey through life, you know.
When did the idea for this trip first occur to you?
1963 came, and everything changed. We'd gone back, me and George and Faye, to New York.
New York City extends its welcome. The shops on the avenues, the new hotels, restaurants, the sidewalk cafes, the hit shows, the tinsel of Broadway.
We had gone back to see the opening of Cuckoo's Nest on Broadway with Kirk Douglas playing McMurphy, and he was terrific.
After the play, part of our daytime diversion as we were cruising around the city, we took a drive out to Queens where the construction was going on for the World's Fair.
Here on this very site is to be erected, they're doing it at the moment, the symbol of the theme of the New York World's Fair, the Unisphere.
And by dialing 1964, I launch the final phase of this great effort.
We looked at it and said, boy, this is spectacular. We're going to want to come see this.
We vowed next year we'd go back to New York to the World's Fair.
On the way back, I was driving across country in a big old nice station wagon with a couple of my buddies, nibbling on cactus.
Here in the ABC newsroom in New York, we first received the flash.
As we were driving along, Kennedy began to be killed.
3 shots were fired at President Kennedy's motorcade in downtown Dallas. The first reports say that President Kennedy has been seriously wounded by this shooting.
The crowd outside is quiet and waiting for some word of the condition of the president.
The president's death is officially confirmed.
President Kennedy and Governor John Connally have been cut down by assassins' bullets in downtown Dallas.
Everywhere you went, you looked in people's eyes, and they all felt the same thing. It wasn't just sadness. It was a loss of an innocence, the loss of the idea that always the good is going to prevail.
The tragedy of this day is beyond any instant comprehension.
There's no way to even nearly depict the pain and the feeling of crisis, the thing that all of us sort of feel when it's real dark.
This is not an ordinary Saturday. Things have changed.
This world that I was presenting with these words, I began to suspect might not have a whole lot to do with the world of this.
So we decided to go travel across the country. I love to drive across the United States, go to the World's Fair and come back across, just to experience the American landscape and hardscape. We're going to take the same station wagon we came back in, and pretty soon Babs was home and he wanted to go.
I was in the Marine Corps for 5 years, flew helicopters in Vietnam, and came out in May of '64, got out of the Marine Corps. I had enough of that. Babs was stalking around. This is just after he got out of the Marines. He began to assign names to them. He became the Intrepid Traveler, and these were his merry band of pranksters. Swashbuckler became my nickname. Gretch had come down from Oregon. We'd met her.
I was an art student at the University of Oregon. My intention was to get a ride. I was going to work in New York, swimming at the World's Fair in water ballet, because that's something I knew how to do. The Rockettes in water.
And pretty soon, Hagen was there, who's an old friend from Oregon, fraternity brother. He had a camera. Sandy, he was a phenomenon. He was in the nut house. He was like the id, stripped of everything else. He was just there. At his worst, he was crazy, and at his best, he was a genius.
Jane Burton, who was a professor in philosophy from Stanford.
She was pregnant, and she was hungry all the time, so she says, well, I'm generally famished. And so she became known as generally famished.
It got to be kind of a party. It's hard to describe it, just a
A bunch of lunatics running around acting idiotic, trying to get to the East Coast somehow.
I met Ken on Perry Lane.
Chloe was the Gertrude Stein of our scene.
I thought it was pretty insane, actually. I really dug everybody for doing it.
Zonker was just there. He wasn't even planning, we weren't planning to take him, we barely knew him. Every time something would happen, he'd fall asleep. And he had this snore.
Okay, here's stark naked. Now, I'm attracted to her. There's no question about it. But she's just so strange.
Michael Hagan invited me to Ken's house for a weekend, and that's how I met everybody. There was just a great deal of general joviality and talking and laughing and dancing, and even then, it was like a troupe of minstrels and mimes. Their presence was very beautiful.
The notion of us being wild crazies wasn't true. We weren't long-haired and we weren't irresponsible. There was an American sense. That's why we always wore a red, white, and blue and flew the flag. It was to try to cool the people out and say, hey, look, this may look strange to you, but get used to it. It's American. Without it, we're a dead nation.
Since it turned out that there were so many of us, friends and everything, too many of us to go in one or two cars, we decided we'd buy a bus and we'd all travel together.
Put on your red dress, baby, 'cause we going out tonight.
We took a 1939 International Harvester school bus.
I got out there with a blindfold. It was your left brain working before it even knew it was the left brain.
Roy was the real painter among us.
First, it didn't appeal to me at all because I thought it looked really good the way it was. Orange with black stripes. Once it was obvious that it was going to happen, I just went ahead. The challenge was to mix it up there so it would be interesting to look at. Somebody just took an old broom up on the top and spilled some paint around, and, you know, people walked around with their bare feet on the bus, leaving footprints of paint.
First it was black and white, then a million different psychedelic colors, and then it would be painted over. I think they must have painted it over 5 or 10 times.
And we decided, well, hey, if we're going to do this bus trip, let's film it. We bought real color film, 16 millimeter, and we'd gotten several real 16 millimeter cameras, and we decided we're going to make a film.
So what kind of film were you making? A feature like Gone with the Wind?
Yeah.
Did anyone on board know how to use the cameras?
None of us knew how to do anything that we were doing.
I'm pretty sure you're gonna knock him dead.
Well, I heard the bus was called Further.
Right.
What does further mean?
Well, I get that question a lot. Oh, it always kind of disappoints me.
What, the people ask you what further means?
Uh-huh.
Well, I could look it up in the dictionary and tell you that it means farther along than this.
No.
I'm pretty disappointed.
Farther is a distance. Further is a bus. One is a philosophical concept, the other is a measurement.
What do you think, Ken?
We needed to do some modifications. We were at a welding shop that was also a junkyard, and we saw this big commercial clothes dryer, and it looked like a tank turret, and we decided we wanted a turret on the top. So we had this welder guy cut a big hole in the top of the bus. I had a motorcycle that we took along, so we had a platform welded on the back of it that we could carry the motorcycle and a generator on. Chuck had donated a 5 kW gas generator.
Ken, why was the idea of a road trip so appealing?
We weren't old enough to be beatniks, and we were a little too old to be hippies. But everybody I knew had read On the Road, and it opened up the doors to us just the same way drugs did.
It gave us a new way to look at America, and it stirred us up.
So, in America, when the sun goes down, and I sit on the old broken down river pier watching the long, long skies over New Jersey, and sense all that raw land that rolls in one unbelievable huge bulge over to the west coast, and all that road going, think of Dean Moriarty, I think of Dean Moriarty.
Oh, and I'm the type of guy who will never settle down. Where pretty girls are, well, you know that I'm around. I kiss them.
A two-tone pink and purple Dodge, riding low on tortured shocks, spurting smoke, races across the curve, over the bridge and skids to the porch. Slams and Kesey stands, hands on hips, watching the arrival.
The car made a rapid approach, and he fit into this place.
There was 8 to 5 when you get through there.
People were hollering, nobody could park there. You can't fit it through. No, no. Come on, Cassidy, come on, man.
But I'm going nowhere. No, yeah, I'm the type of guy that likes to roam around. I'm never in one place. I roam from town to town.
Before the smoke had cleared, there was this guy with no shirt on, talking a mile a minute. We all knew who he was. This was Dean Moriarty. Couldn't believe it, our famous Dean Moriarty.
Yeah, I'm a wanderer. Yeah, a wanderer. I roam around.
I'd read On the Road, so I knew he was supposed to be Dean Moriarty, but I didn't like that character in the book too much. And I liked Neil better.
All of a sudden, out pops this man, almost from nowhere. He reminded me more of an Irish leprechaun at first. When he opened his mouth, he said about 40 words. And all of a sudden, everything in the universe was and is all right, and all beautiful, and all funny and meaningful, all at the same time.
For me, I'm watching it all and thinking, wow, he kind of looks like my dad. And my dad is going to drive the bus.
He came along kind of as a father figure. I got to take care of you boys, understand, change your tires. Here I got this 8-ton jack. I got this lug wrench. You guys don't have a lug wrench in your goddamn bus. Here, look, I got a couple of spare inner tubes. This boot goes inside. You never saw a boot before. Probably goes inside the spare tire. And a big tire. You know, we're talking about 1000 by 20.
We started out in La Honda, and there was all this big deal. We've been getting ready for days and packing and fixing, and finally it was the moment we were leaving La Honda, and everybody gathered around and waved us goodbye, and we climbed on the bus.
Fuck the horn!
And it started off, and it went out the gate and across the bridge and ran out of gas.
Well, the moment of departure was beautiful. We ran out of gas on Kesey's bridge. We figured at that rate, 25 feet an hour. We had a week to get to New York. We weren't worried.
This is taking disorganization to some sort of peak.
It was just ludicrous. And somehow or other, that was just like the perfect omen for the start of this trip.
I used to think I was Napoleon, too.
We set out just like in Easy Rider or Travels with Charlie, where Steinbeck sets out to seek the soul of America.
It looked like a traveling pleasure palace. We could ride across the country in total comfort. It was big and roomy and spacious until we got all the people in it. Then it was crowded. It was the exact opposite of a pleasure palace.
And those right here, the 72 disciples.
I was on the first 24 hours that it took us to get from La Honda to San Jose. I don't know, what is it 40 miles? It took us 24 hours to get to San Jose.
We didn't get very far, and mechanical spasms started happening on the bus, and the engine was sputtering, so we pulled into a gas station.
Some old gas station man took a look at that thing, looked at the engine, says, "You'll never get that thing past Oklahoma."
Well, I'm saying to myself, Jesus Christ, this thing is fucked. Look, it's painted weird. The mechanics behind it are equally as weird.
While everybody was working on the engine, I was messing around with the headset and was going, "We're on our way to San Jose,
How would you stay?
While I was doing that, I happened to turn around and I noticed Chloe looking really glum. I said, "What's wrong?" And she says, If it takes us this long to get to San Jose, she says, we'll never make it to New York City. She says, I can't take this. This is too chaotic. And that was as far as she lasted on the bus.
Yeah, I was pretty glad to get off. I mean, thank God I'm not crossing the country in it.
And you got back across the country by more civilized means, I imagine?
TWA.
TWA's the way.
There's been a one-step removal, I think, from our connection with life. And I'll tell you where you can see it. Go to L.A. We can't see anymore. We can barely hear anymore. When we look, we're not looking at, we're looking for. I tell you, Hollywood has sold us an idea of what life looks like. What color is World War II? World War I is even a better example. What color is World War I? It's black and white, whereas the Civil War is in Technicolor. What happens if all of this stuff that's being sold us has damn near closed the door on any possibility of our doing anything new, on our doing anything except traveling in the same little circle? And if that is true, how do we break out of it?
See, Tony Perkins, as a sick cat, not being approved of and all, as the son, you see, would be, so he'd have a mania.
All you can do is experience this thing. This, as near as I can see, is what's going on. As near as I can record it, it may not make sense. I'm just trying to open up like a camera and see it clearly for a moment.
I remember when we first headed out of L.A., out of Ken Babs's place, where we spent a couple days painting a swimming pool and so forth.
When the bus headed out, Babs was living in San Juan Capistrano with his wife Anita and his kids. And we went through Capistrano, and he realized this is his merry band of pranksters, and he better climb aboard.
The original prankster credo that started the whole prankster movement was one of, you start off by saying, never trust a prankster. Because no matter how I try, I will eventually lie to you, even though I may not want to. If I say one thing today, it may not be tomorrow.
Go ahead, would you repeat that again?
This young lady said, Cassidy, you're the biggest hand that ever lived. Well, naturally, what would you do? When a loudmouth reforms, nothing worse than a converted sinner.
When we started out with the bus, I realized I wasn't going to be able to write a book about this, because you can't. It's an experience.
Mistaken judgment as usual, something of a nature of vaudeville pickup.
This wasn't literature anymore. This jumped off the pages and onto the streets.
Yes, that's it, Commander, as usual. Damn near went for a second. Now, you know, I was awful high there.
We took off, went across the desert, and headed for Arizona.
Now, hear me. Clear the rear, clear the rear.
Cassidy talked a lot.
Well, now, hear me. Being over-geared and high as I've been without applying any gas because of the curiosity of the galaxy ahead. That semi that passed was basically...
We'd take turns riding shotgun with him so he'd have somebody to talk to while he was driving.
And I felt, and I'll tell you why it went over. Because up my spine came the Kundalini again. Not the Kundalini as a purified, not the real Kundalini, the transcendence. You were living.
He was a radio. He just went on and on and on. It was almost impossible for him to ever shut off. He couldn't help himself. It had a lot to do with speed.
Thyroid, yes. Of this third movement, major portion, critical point.
Okay, settle in.
Attracting the cops and how to deal with concealing the drugs that we had, that was always a consideration throughout the whole bus trip because the cops were stopping us because they'd never seen anything like it.
Commander, I wasted your time. That's why I'm not ready.
Cassidy would always be out there talking to him and say, oh yeah, officer, he says, you can see what they're like back there. He said, but I'm doing my best to keep them in control.
Unloosen that thing. We're having a Brief equipment.
Our instant cover was always to get the cameras out and run out and say we were making a movie.
I don't know. We don't have a camera with any film.
People didn't think we were hippies or that we were drug freaks. That wouldn't have occurred to anybody because it wasn't in the news yet.
How did you get mixed up with LSD in the first place?
I came out of the University of Oregon, the prettiest little boy you've ever seen. I didn't smoke, I didn't drink. I went to Stanford on a Ford Foundation fellowship. And while at Stanford, I was given the opportunity to go to the Stanford Hospital and take part in the LSD experiments.
How did you become a volunteer for these experiments?
I, at the time, was training for the Olympics team and was in
As a
good
wrestler?
shape. Yeah, as a wrestler. I've never been drunk on beer, let alone done any drugs, but this is the American government.
The study of LSD continues in laboratories and hospitals throughout the United States.
They paid us $25 a day to come down there, and then they gave us stuff.
What is LSD? How does it work? When did it all begin?
It all began in a laboratory very much like this one. In 1938, Dr. Albert Hoffman in Switzerland was looking for new drugs in the treatment of migraine headaches.
When I discovered LSD, it was believed it was a product of laboratory. And then we discovered that these compounds had existed already for thousands of years in the plant kingdom.
He had been studying molds that grow on rye plants. Now, it turned out that these substances were of no use in the treatment of migraine headaches. However, it was found that these substances could produce a change in mental state closely resembling some forms of insanity, in particular, schizophrenia.
When I was asked to do these drug experiments, I thought these drugs might give us a way to cure insanity, to overcome depression. That was part of what we thought we were doing.
What kind of preparation were you given for it? Were you given any?
None at all. I'd read a little piece in Life magazine about how they'd given it to cats, and cats were afraid of mice once they'd had LSD.
What was that very first trip like, though, under the experimental conditions?
It was on a ward, on a nut house ward. You'd go in, a little room, there'd be a bed, and a stand with some water on it, and a tape recorder, and nothing else. There's a little window right here with wire through it, and you could look out and see the people out in the other room.
Do you have any anxiety, or do you feel kind of excited about the idea?
Well, I feel more excited than I do anxious.
You feel pretty good about the whole thing and kind of open and just waiting to see what happens.
That's right.
That's very good. Sounds like a good experiment.
The machine here to my left is all cogs and gears of electricity. And I keep thinking that I should hear from it. I feel fairly drunk, like I'm lying on the back with the whirlies. They're dim. Light at the top of the room is like a great eye, to which the optic nerves are leading to all the walls. Like the nurse who was in here, she's wearing this sheath-style costume, probably because the belly around her middle is beginning to be blue and overhanging, and she has to cover that blue, rolly flesh. It's like looking at Rorschach test and seeing mashed testicles. It's 1:45, and I'm high out of my mind. Wild color images. There's this great colored frog of a man outside standing at the door, like at some guy's room, and the guy's all teetering on the bed there. And the guy's yelling, "Mac! Hey, Mac!" This is the most insane thing. I just realized surprised how much the woolen sack microphone looks like a shaver. Woolen sack. Woolen sack, what a thought.
And also the trouble with you as a tape recorder, you waiting toad, look at you there. You don't realize how much you look like this toad. From where I lay, I could see the unwinding reel. It's your brain without which you don't even become a toad anymore. You're just a dead thing which could be loaded with new brain. I can see it unwinding. Therefore, I'm going to shut you off because we're losing too much of your brain.
Yeah.
How are you feeling right now? Do you seem to feel there's still some effect of the drug?
Oh, yeah. Oh, I told you about the strobe light. It was so great.
What was the effect of the strobe light?
It was like a magnetic force of you because everything I went to was concentric, going into where the strobe light, bats and hen eggs and everything cascading into the strobe light, and it blinked. The guy next door was playing his band rock and roll, and this would have an effect of very discordant in color.
It affected the imagery. You mentioned two things, bats and hen eggs. Were there other things you could see going in?
Well, there are more mathematical patterns, hexagons and pentagons and mummies and things that you might find on a pyramid wall.
Was this, would you say, an uncomfortable or a comfortable experience?
I think it's a good experience. I think anytime you see more, especially if you have a basic inherent love of most people.
And when I came out of it, I felt like it was like discovering a hole that went into the center of the earth, and you could see jewelry down there, and you wanted your people to go down and enjoy it.
Trailer for sale or rent. Rooms to let 56. No phone, no pool, no pets. Ain't got no cigarettes.
Cassidy drove all night and everybody slept or didn't sleep, depending on what they were doing.
Was supposed to head to Tucson arrived. No, there. Judged, as it were, police. How you do? What about your previous plan? 69. Oh, all right. Oh, especially south.
In 1964, the ultra-conservative Barry Goldwater was running for president. What did you make of Kesey's Goldwater stunt in Phoenix?
I was kind of puzzled by the need to get into the politics of Barry Goldwater. I kind of thought the whole thing was sort of ridiculous.
A vote for Barry is a vote for fun.
It was a tongue-in-cheek thing. We wanted to wave the flag, but waving the flag downtown in Phoenix kind of seemed like you're for Goldwater, so we painted the vote for Barry as a vote for fun and then drove down the main street of Phoenix backwards.
Even as you were driving the bus across the country, reviews were coming in for Sometimes a Great Notion. And they were peculiar.
Yes, they didn't know exactly what to say about it. Cuckoo's Nest was a phenomenon. It received nothing but good reviews.
Most people are surprised to learn that you'd never even seen the movie. You even threatened to sue the producers.
I told these lawyers I'll never see the movie. They emphasized the melodrama.
Who's the villain in Cuckoo's Nest?
The nurse.
No. The Combine is the villain, and the big nurse is the minion of that, but she's not the villain. I'm mopping near the ward door when a key hits it from the other side, and I know it's the big nurse. She's carrying her woven wicker bag full of 1,000 parts she aims to use in her duties today. Wheels and gears and tiny peels that gleam like porcelain. Needles and forceps and rolls of copper wire.
Good morning, Miss Ratchet.
The big nurse tends to get real put out if something keeps her outfit from running like a precision-made machine, what she calls adjusted.
Medication time.
She works with an eye to adjusting the outside world, too, working alongside others like her, who I call the Combine.
Chief? Writing that story from the point of view of that Indian, that's what makes that book.
And I don't know any Indians. I don't know where that Indian came from. Those first 3 pages of Cuckoo's Nest were written on peyote. I've always felt humbled by that character. Without the character of that Indian, the book is a melodrama. You know, it's a straight battle between McMurphy and the big nurse.
Isn't it true that the inspiration for the book came from your real-life experiences?
I got a job at the Nut House and worked from midnight to 8. Make no mistake about it, being crazy is painful. Looking out through the little window, through my crazed eyes, I saw that these people have something going and there's a truth to it. It gave me an empathy. This was, to me, supposed to be a revolutionary novel. It wasn't Freudian man against woman, it was man against machine. I took a deep breath and bent over and took the levers. I heaved my legs under me and felt the grind of weight at my feet and heard the wires and connections tearing out of the floor. I was able to get an arm around it and my other hand under it and let the momentum carry the panel through the screen and window with a ripping crash. I put my hand on the sill and vaulted over the pane. I ran across the grounds. I felt like I was flying, free.
We can blame the World's Fair for this, boys and girls.
Boy, it was just hot across that desert. And being hot and hot. What did we do? We just go look for a cool place.
We'd ridden all night the night before, and I'd gone to sleep in one of the upper bunks, and my purse had slipped down between the bunk and the side of the bus and gone out the open window. It had everything in it. Here I was, pregnant, traveling with a bunch of madmen, and I didn't even have a dime. If I'd had my money, it wouldn't have bothered me at all, because I could have walked off at any stage. I could have gone to the nearest bus at any time. Now, I was trapped.
Suddenly, Cassidy drove right off the road and started driving towards this little pond and got stuck right in the sand. He drove it, vroom, and there we were, shocked as can be.
Ah, yes, stuck in the mud in Arizona desert in the summertime.
Cassidy, God, he was having a good time.
It was hot, boy, let me tell you, it was hot. It was blazing hot. There I am, that's me, and there's Kesey right behind me in the sunglasses, and we're all looking at it, and we're stuck deep in the mud.
If for no other reason than the fact that I'm going to bring you, if you don't get out, get out. Hey,
Kesey had sent someone off on the motorcycle to go look for help. And then Kesey had this brainstorm that, since we were going to be stuck for a while, we should take LSD.
So, I want to take some LSD. I want Babs to take some. Cassidy, you want to take some? I would, yes, I would.
The ridiculous thing was that the acid was just mixed into a jar of orange juice that was in the refrigerator. Nobody had any idea what the dosage was. It was this sort of deal where you shook up the jar and passed it around and took a swig. As the acid came on, the setting up of the filming was starting to happen, too.
What else we got up there? Another camera, don't we?
We're going to take the Aeroflex 2 magazines. We're going to have one magazine on the Aeroflex. We're going to have the The other camera with the zoom lens also mounted on a tripod. George's going to run the zoom on the tripod.
Was he filming that?
My merry band of pranksters won't be lollygagging around in the dirt. Come on, come on. No, no, none of this misery stuff. Come on, this is the merry gang. Keep it moving. It's Farm Girl. I'm scratching, stretching. She's mighty fetching. Always scratching kitchen matches and never itching.
There she is out there.
You know when you have a dream where wells carry you out to sea.
Once I hit the pond, I realized I was really high.
The little creatures had their little wings.
The water opened itself up to me in a new dimension. There was no murkiness. It was super clear, real crystal. It was just there for myself and itself to groove on each other.
If the birds find the ocean and the whales swim in the clouds.
It was a joy.
Farewell forever, Paula, as she sinks beneath the depths. And the next creature you shall see emerge, a slime queen, the high priestess of pranksters.
That's the slime, the algae. It was talking to me. It was welcoming me into its realm of existence.
Where the sunrise sets and the sunrise.
It was like the nature spirits, the stuff in there. It was saying, finally, we're in contact with a human being. We've been trying to get through to you guys for a while. They were happy, and I was happy.
Whales want to love your face. Whales want to be your friend. Whales want to have you.
That's Miss Slime of 1964. These horses just showed up and added such a nice kind of backdrop effect.
Oh, there are the horses. It was incredibly beautiful. I don't remember much reaction to these horses. To me, they look kind of old and flea-bitten.
I was thinking about how nice it would look to pour some of those paints in up there. Let's see what they look like.
After we took the acid, I think it was Kesey's idea, we took bottles of dope paint, which are used for painting model airplanes. And it's enamel-based paint, so when you put it on the water, it floats.
Oh, and that's I'll never drink downstream from the Merry Pranksters campsite.
So we had lots of colors, so we were dipping the colors in there and watching it all marbleize. We took Zonker's white t-shirt and put it in the water with the paint and invented tie-dye.
God, I was pissed. They said, oh, it's water soluble. Oh, don't worry about it, man. Worry about what? That's one of my clean t-shirts. Fuck your clean t-shirts, somebody said. George said, back up, just like I do. Spin around. Fuck you. God, watch this thing. Actually, I was having a good time.
Stark Naked really started wigging out.
She's definitely stoned on acid. We put all our acid in 1-quart ball jar of lemonade. And I remember seeing her run down to the refrigerator and get it out, and upend it.
Get a picture of Ron over here, Mike, with this side. Kathy was loaded. Hagen says, I'm going to make a movie star out of her no matter what it takes. You know, it's the pretty girl movie star trip, you know. The guy with the camera comes along and says, hey, pretty girl, how'd you like to stand in front of my camera? Yeah, sure, why not? You know, make me a star. Judy Garland in the drugstore, or whatever the trip is, you know.
Hey, here's the thing. No, 2 more of these, and I think we'll be able to start using film. Set up.
The first signs of strain were beginning to show on some of the healthy young faces. And I was trying to keep things together there because I could suddenly see everything coming to pieces. Here was this mad woman on my hands. What have I got myself into?
Throughout the bus trip, you seem to enjoy the chaos, but at the same time, gently guide the action.
People felt that enlightenment was going entirely with the flow. But that's like being the ball in a football game. I'd rather be the quarterback. I want to handle the ball. I don't want to just be thrown around.
Ken was trying to run this whole thing and be all philosophical, and he was caught up in a million different trips.
And how long will it go on? How long can we wait for help when no help is coming for?
It reminds me of Madophilia. I don't remember this at all. I remember swimming in the lake, but none of this. For Stark, obviously it was too much to bear. For Gretchen and Babs, they fell in love.
Starting the bus trip, I was Kesey's lover, but after I met Babs, he and I became lovers and stayed so.
I wish I could take all these thoughts back to Zane.
Okay! The camera's fucked up. Hey! Hey!
The tractor has indeed arrived. They're going to pull us out of this swamp. Standing there scratching his balls.
Okay, let's go! Take that! Come on! Backer! Whoa! Wait a minute. He hasn't got it reversed yet.
I think you're pulling against each other.
She and Babs then developed a great affair since Romeo and Juliet.
I got my mojo working, babe, and I'm gonna try it on you.
The love relationships was one of the very obvious things that was going on. I mean, nothing was hidden, you know?
And I'm gonna try it out on you.
Babs was really worried that Kesey would be really pissed off because Kesey was single, because his wife wasn't there, so he was unattached sexually.
Now I'm gonna try it on you. Oh, yeah.
He did sulk for a while, but he kind of woke up out of his stupor and looked over and said, "Nothing lasts." So that became one of the prankster mottos, too. Nothing lasts.
All this stuff that we went through, all these intertanglements of our relationships, our marriages, and our loves and lovers, I think all of this is soap opera 101. It's like we're all in this class together. And we went through it for several weeks on the bus.
Stark Naked never quite recovered from Wickiup. All her molecules, I don't think, came back together. And she climbs out onto the platform in the back, and pretty soon all the truckers were honking behind us. Honk, 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 honk. And Cassidy couldn't figure out what was going on, so somebody looked out the back window, and there she had taken the blanket off her, and she was just standing out on the back deck, just flaunting herself. She had all the semis heading for Houston backed up behind us. Nobody wanted to pass us because they were all watching her.
That kind of madness is only terrifying and miserable to the people who are outside of it. To someone who's inside of it, it's really not. I just wanted to go into the darkness and be alone with my own thoughts. I think my psychic vision in relationship to myself was that I was getting a little bit homesick.
Then not long after that, we pulled into Larry McMurtry's, which was kind of a nice middle-class, very tidy neighborhood.
Larry lives in this upper middle-class collegiate section of town, and this electric multicolored circus bus shows up.
Larry appeared at the bus with a little child, and it reminded me of my daughter. I jumped off the bus and I guess much to his amazement, grabbed the baby.
And she opens her arms wide, and the blanket that she had wrapped around her dropped.
And she's standing there stark naked. I thought she looked just fine, as a matter of fact. I think it might have been a little bit of a problem for Larry McMurtry as far as his neighbors were concerned.
Things just kind of continued to go downhill from then on.
I guess I was going through a thing with Michael Hagen, and it might have been his attention that he paid to other women that disturbed me. It must have been about 2 or 3 in the morning. I couldn't sleep, and I just felt like kind of walking it off. I was in a bad mood, actually, and I went out in my bare feet.
Larry McMurtry. Situation has come up where I might need an attorney. Some friends of mine came in from California yesterday in a big bus on their way to the World's Fair, Ken, Kesey, and several other people. And they had a girl with them who was pretty disturbed. During the night, she got away from us, and the cops picked her up. By the time we got down there, they had put her under psychiatric surveillance.
Where are my friends? Do my friends know I'm here?
They held me in a cell for a little while. Then they had someone come to talk to me. By this time, I was just a complete wreck. People were asking me a lot of strange questions, and I just didn't answer any of them, except I think I gave them my name, and that was all. Name, rank, and serial number, so to speak.
You're right around here to the desk. You're in the hospital.
Hello, I'm a nurse. What's your name? Your hand is...
What happened to Stark Naked?
One of her friends in San Francisco came out and got her, and she ended up going back home with him, and that was as far as she got on the trip.
We sort of abandoned her. We figured anybody that couldn't hold their shit together just wasn't going to be able to make it. You know, we had a trip to do. We had to keep moving.
And it also made me nervous, thinking, who's going to be left behind next? Is it going to be me?
Weren't you concerned that this trip was beginning to unravel?
I'll tell you a thing that I learned while I was working in the asylum that I think is the most important thing I've ever learned. Every once in a while, all the power, the attention that you have comes to bear on exactly what you're doing and doesn't decide whether it's good or bad. It just decides that it is. And the only thing you can do is enjoy the ride.
He's coming in to New Orleans when the single marching in.
Well, Cassidy wanted to show us New Orleans because he was familiar with it, and he was so excited to be in New Orleans. It was a big, big deal. He had his favorite haunts. He was kind of a tour guide. We went down to the heart of the jazz district. Cassidy was a big jazz aficionado. We loved jazz.
Ah, the old absinthe bar.
The old absinthe
I
bar.
remember that I was there once, but I forgot.
I was there once.
Pouring in on us at the warm 11 o'clock morning on Canal Street in New Orleans is this feeling of everything moving slower and slower.
Slower and slower.
Very thick air.
Caught in some kind of molasses mind warp we were.
That was where we started to drink mint juleps. I think we went down in a basement, too.
We saw somebody had just moved into the other room where there's a piano. And he went in there and sat down, and he started to play.
My baby left me. My baby left me a long time ago.
I know Kesey was just crazy about him. God, he'd come over and he'd say, wow, this guy's great. He wanted to take him with us or something like that.
A woman walked out the
Air is still thick with dust motes swirling and following us out the door and up and onto the bus, and there we went. Moonlight Sinatra boarding with us, and we realized we got to dip this sucker in the water before he goes off. So we said, where can we find some water? He says, go to Lake Pontchartrain. He didn't know where it was, he just heard about it. At the 60s and what started there. Music was changed forever. The feminist movement started there. The civil rights movement while we were driving that bus across the country. Martin Luther King was in Selma.
Either you give the Negro his God-given rights and his freedom, or you face the fact of continual social disruption and social chaos.
You have to remember this is 1964, and it's right when the civil rights thing was in a very early infancy, so white-only, black-only consciousness was still really prevalent in the South. And the story about Lake Pontchartrain was that we'd pulled into a black-only area of the lake. Of course, the pranksters didn't know that. They just pulled up to this lake because they saw it and wanted to go swimming.
We got out, I'm loaded on acid, right? Okay, and all these other guys are loaded on acid. Okay, here we are. I think I don't notice that anything is odd, even at this point.
And as we're swimming around in this hot, humid first day of summer Louisiana day, I remember looking around this swimming hole that we'd all just practically ran and jumped into. I thought, God, there's a lot of colored people here, and there's not very many white people. Well, there's one, there's one, there's one. I looked around, and I had this sudden realization that I knew every single one of the white people in that swimming hole. And then it dawned on me, shit, we just integrated this place. Then all of a sudden, this wave of paranoia went through us all.
Talk about being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Well, that's the kind of thing that could have started a race riot.
I don't believe a word was said. We all just grabbed everything, jumped on the bus, and left. Babs just fell down in the yard in Pensacola, Florida. We went to this place where his old roommates still lived in Pensacola, where they'd been Marines together.
We arrived, and Bab's Marine buddy was still at work. And so Kesey had the idea of making a little theatrical thing to film.
The Flying Queen will lead the way.
Oh, this is funny. I remember this really well. I consider this to be one of the most fucked up days on the whole trip. Being pregnant, I was miserable. It was just really hot, and there was no reason to be there, and there's nothing to do, so we did this. I was trying to be cooperative, but I can tell you that it really had nothing going for me.
This is some kind of absurd dance, as I recall. I enjoyed it. I just wish I could have played the trombone better.
Playing those instruments, god damn it. Somebody starts playing the saxophone for the first time, well, they want it to sound like John Coltrane. Well, they're not gonna sound like John Coltrane. That's what made me so mad. They thought they would just because they wanted to, but you don't. It takes practice.
Here's Babs's friend from Vietnam who rolls in.
Pleased to meet you, sir. Yes, indeed, it's been quite some time. Toodly-doodle. Yes, it's a little strange since the court, don't you think? I've changed my uniform slightly. And this is my new battalion, yes, quite. Yeah, we've given up helicopters. Most of these guys can only fly at night. So we've given up helicopters. We now travel by bus. It's slower but more deliberate.
We must press onward at all forward speed, fast. Ahead, fast, late. Yeah. Tennis, anyone? Tennis? Where the hell are we?
Well, now, John Babbs became kind of the semi-quasi-navigator and became known as Sometimes Missing because one time when he was mapping us through one town, we went through another, and when everybody got off the bus to take a leak and went on again, he wasn't there, and nobody noticed it until about 100 miles later. But then, as we turned around to go pick him up, here came a car, and he jumped out. He had hitchhiked and caught up with us.
John Babbs was in the back seat, waving his arms like this and trying to get our attention, so we pulled over and picked him up. That's how we got the name Sometimes Missing.
You know you took
Welcome to New Jersey, speed 50. New Jersey Turnpike. Truck driver I ran into said the Dean Moriarty was an 8-wheel, low-bed, flatbed trailer. He says, yeah, when I read it.
In a way, Cassidy saw himself as a guardian of that trip, and he was. He was driving, but he was not masterminding the situation. That was Kesey's trip.
We are actually fourth-dimensional beings in a third-dimensional body inhabiting a second-dimensional world. I know, I say second-dimensional, all these primary movements like elemental.
People following him all the time, egging him on to greater heights of self-indulgence. And he always did it. He always tried to be more of this hero that was this self-indulgent, on-the-road, epic legend.
Yes, sir.
License and registration.
Of course.
Where you heading?
250, I think it's Madison Avenue.
We all learned a great deal from Neil Cassidy. This is a guy that knows what he's doing, and this is his medium. It's words, it's cars, and it's drugs.
Last night, but the night before, yes, sir. And that's why.
Everybody get back on the bus.
Even on the job.
We can all do making noises and hitting sticks together, but to be able to use the most advanced of instruments, which is our mind and our voice. Cassidy could do it better than anybody using words.
New York, 7 days. Speeders lose licenses. Concerto di la passing diesel. One-handed delight. No, that's masturbating. No.
He was like a bus driver coming into his land. You know, he'd spent a lot of time. He wasn't from New York, he was from Denver. But he'd spent a lot of time back there, you know, back in the days with Kerouac and Ginsberg and those guys. And yeah, I think he first learned to drive as a parking lot attendant in New York, as a matter of fact.
Like a cat, exit 9. Turtle 9, exit 9. Love potion number 9. But when they left off, I said, love potion number 9. I lost love potion number 9. There's the Empire State Building, get ahead on 7 miles, 5 miles, 7 possibilities, 7 miles, Empire. That number right?
Well, coming into New York was exciting because that was our destination.
Welcome to the Bronx.
I was there. This was it. I had made it to New York.
What an unnatural environment when you look at New York with the streets and the cars.
We are the Merry Band of Pranksters.
When we went into New York City, we were all on top of the bus, playing instruments and tootling around everybody. It's a lot of fun interacting with the people.
You
women have heard of jalopies, you've heard the noise they make, but let me introduce my new Rocket 88. Yes, it's straight, just one way. Everybody likes my Rocket 88. Baby, we'll ride in style, moving all along.
You know, I got on the bus when it pulled up in New York, and we drive all over New York. You felt like you were in an aquarium on the other side of the glass.
The public always grinned when they saw that bus. It's like kids when they see an Easter egg. It's simple. There it is. It's colored. It's an egg. Nobody felt the slightest bit threatened by it.
Ken really believed that things could be changed, that consciousness could be changed. He saw himself as a kind of liberator for the generation, and he saw the bus trip as a kind of going to New York, a kind of, you know, Napoleon goes to Paris.
The best the bus ever was when we drove through Harlem. Had all these people running out and following us along in Harlem. All these kids.
Some 2 weeks later, the bus has somehow managed to get across the country. And once again, you encountered the bus.
Yes. 1239 Madison Avenue was where this apartment was that I knew about. The next morning, pranksters showed up. And they all came in with about 500 pounds of equipment. I mean, they just had wires and cameras and lights, and it was instantly strewn from one end of the apartment to the other. It looked like a bus. It looked like the inside of the bus. And so that night, it was this fantastic party that got sort of out of hand, and the poor doorman kept coming up and saying everybody was complaining, and it went on and on and on and on. And everyone was very excited that Kerouac was there, and he was getting really drunk, and Ginsberg came.
I saw the best minds of my generation destroyed by madness, starving, hysterical, naked, dragging themselves through the Negro streets at dawn looking for an angry fix.
Ginsberg is like a sponge. He can sop up all our poisons. I bought the record Howl. He was kind of like a folk singer to me more than a poet. I knew the sound of him reading before I read any of his stuff.
Set up, smoking in the supernatural darkness of cold water flats, floating across the tops of cities, contemplating jazz.
And when we headed off on the bus, it was only natural that we should head to New York and try to find Ginsberg and Kerouac.
Unfortunately, it wasn't like meeting the author. It was more like, see if we can get him to respond to our antics, which didn't happen. He was not enthused with our craziness.
The thing you gotta realize about Kerouac, it was like he was already sort of an old guy and kind of out of it. He was already crystallized. He was kind of a sad character.
We had been accepted by the old gunfighters, you know. This is the real heavies in our mythologies. Kerouac, Cassidy, Ginsberg.
Neil was more on the right track when he got started with the beat movement.
Kerouac and I met him in '45, so he was only 20 then. And within that year, he and I had a romance that lasted on and off for, well, till at least, I think the last time we were in bed together was '66, so that's 21 years.
I got a whole theory about this man. What he was the real smart Catholic boy who got sucked up by Kerouac. But he was real poetic, like all these Irish Catholics are. And he got in with some poets, and he got aspirations. And somebody plants a little seed of how great you could be because you're so great, so sexy, so poetic. He fell in love with that idea, which was something he couldn't possibly achieve. So then he was split between the two worlds. He couldn't create anything for himself. He couldn't get it together with a lady and have a good family. He couldn't go off and be a faggot with Ginsberg. He couldn't be anything.
It's an exact mimicry of Ginsberg 20 years ago, you know?
Ginsberg used to be wild, huh? Ginsberg's so cool
shit.
now.
He used to run over Columbia rooftops waving genitals and manuscript. You know?
The whole point of this trip, supposedly at least in the beginning, was that everyone was going to go to the fair. All the pranksters were so excited. This day, we drove to the fair, and it was like the hottest 29th of June that ever had been.
Practically everybody in the world is coming to the fair.
I made my reservation. I'm leaving town tomorrow. I'll find somebody new. There'll be no more sorrow. That's what I do each time, but I can't follow through. I can't break away. So you make me cry. I can't break away. I can't say.
Welcome to the world of tomorrow.
Well, see, the whole idea, this was what drove me up the wall, was it was going to be made into a movie of everybody running about in the fair. Well, nobody kept together. There was nothing to film. It was all just so dispersed.
We lost sometimes missing again. That's what always happens.
Ken and Babs were so manic and so high. They drank this vile yellow concoction.
Swashbuckler, I'll pull out my sword.
Well, of course, the one thing I wanted to see was where the water ballet was supposed to happen. My whole reason for going to New York was to try to locate a job possibility. Babs and I searched and finally found this beautiful pool and found out they had canceled the whole water ballet.
And these same people probably also take in the exhibit where the wizardry of modern chemistry is presented with entertaining showmanship.
Better things for better living through chemistry for the finer world we want. Better things for better living through chemistry, that's the promise of DuPont.
The fair was trippy and great. When you're high, more variety the better.
You are about to take a journey out of this world into the world of the future. Forget the world around you. Forget the people around you. You are entering Futurama, alone with your own thoughts.
The World's Fair was on, which was a great thing. It was a vision of the future of America, and Ken saw it that way. The irony is that curved, finned corporate America, Tomorrowland, as presented at the 1964 World's Fair, was over before it began. 64. Things were changing. We didn't know that World's Fairs were a thing of the past.
By then, the trip became more important than the destination. Never mind where we're going, it doesn't make a difference where you're going. The whole notion of the trip, take an acid trip, came out of that summer.
The effect is somewhat like looking through a microscope. Suddenly, when you look through a microscope, you discover that there's an invisible world around you that you hadn't known about before you did it. The same thing is true with a psychedelic drug.
After the disappointment of the World's Fair, you headed to Timothy Leary's compound, the International Foundation for Internal Freedom. Was it called IFIF?
IFIF. It was like a 4,000-acre farm outside of Poughkeepsie in Millbrook, New York.
We teach people how to turn on, or how to go out of their minds. By turn on, we mean to tune in, to get beyond your routine ways of thinking and acting and experiencing.
Ginsberg is the one that set it all up because he knew those guys at IFIF, and he thought it would be a great opportunity for us to meet each other. It was like the West Coast acid heads meeting the East Coast acid heads and having a powwow.
Let it off!
We pulled into their scene, making a lot of noise. We set off the smoke grenade.
Pranksters have found their merry castle.
They're there! They're there!
And I have to inform you just what's exactly going on.
We're high and they're coming down. So what's going on?
You know, that quiet time after a trip when you just want to be very mellow. And up drives the bus with these speed freaks. And they come to have fun and play with flutes, and everybody in the house took one look and fled, leaving me to welcome them.
So raise your glass, we'll drink a toast to the little man who sells you thrills along the pier.
The whole Millbrook scene, it was just the other end of the same stick, I think. We were scuffy and didn't have much money and pulled into this mansion, which was upper crust. We felt a kinship to them, but we could also tell that they were wishing that we'd leave.
What everybody anticipated didn't turn out. It kind of fizzled. We waited all day for Leary to show up, and he just avoided us. And then he sort of disappeared with Cassidy, and Cassidy went upstairs and hung out with it. They didn't want us to go upstairs. Alpert was very friendly. He was there.
Just listening to Alpert talk, man, it seemed like he was a fucking crazy man.
All of my games were like going off into the distance. I got this terrible panic because indeed I was going to cease to exist. And I got the panic, which is the panic that precedes the psychological death, because indeed Richard Alpert was dying.
These people scared the shit out of me, man.
They were very clinical and controlled, and we were really free form. We were the explorers, and they were the scientists. And so we just entertained ourselves at this waterfall.
Shake it up, baby. Shake it up, baby. Twist and shout. Twist and shout. Come on, baby. Come on, baby.
And that's where Kathy Van Leeuwen got her nickname, Sensuous Experience.
Sensuous X, yes, I remember well. Her name was implied in her very bearing, that is to say, her bodily example.
Kathy was Zonker's girlfriend in college, and that's why Zonker went on the trip.
Sensuous, oh my God, look at her. Oh, she's so much like Marilyn Monroe, right? Now, I'm wondering at this point whether my girlfriend has been having sex with these people or not.
And that's the point at which Kesey started flirting with her, trying to get her attention. And he did get her attention.
Have you ever heard the story about Peggy the Pistol?
He says all my dope is yours as he's fucking my girlfriend. Thanks, Kesey. I wanted to get out of New York as quick as possible. And I was basically telling her that she could get on the bus, but I was gone. But then I realized that I really didn't want to leave her with all these fuckers.
And when they were getting ready to leave town, I had to decide, you know, was I gonna stay or was I gonna go? At that point, I was still planning on staying to work. It didn't work out that way. I got sucked into the prankster scene too much, too heavily. So I stayed on the bus.
I wasn't there on the way back. I was so happy to be off of it.
Coming back's a whole nother trip. Cassidy, he didn't come back with us.
The trip across was basically lengths of Neil's driving consciousness. And then on the way back, suddenly the driving duties were thrust upon the rest of us.
Everybody took turns. The guys, anyway. That was on the way back. We just started driving the bus down this abandoned dirt road and ended up at this incredible lake, and there was nobody there but us. We decided we wanted to find a spot to take IT-290.
The IT-290 was famous. That's the Rolls Royce of the psychedelics.
Kesey had stolen a jar. He claimed it was the last jar of IT-290 on the planet. And so he wanted a very special place for everybody to take it. So we built a little fire and made a little campground and popped the IT-290 and had the trip. Oh, it was wonderful. It's even better than acid. It's a hallucinogen, but very calm. Acid can have a hard edge to it sometimes, but this is very calming. Colors, very vivid. It was very communal in that you felt connected to everybody.
I thought this was as American as you could get because we were exploring a new territory, just the same way we went to the moon or sent Lewis and Clark expedition here to Oregon. It was part of our American personality. You find a cave, nobody's been in it, you go in it. You try to go down deeper in the ocean and up higher in the sky, and these drugs were opening the door to new landscapes. Once you're through that door and you look out into this vast room with all these windows onto new vistas, you become tremendously excited and want to do what you can to explore it, because you could look around and you saw that there weren't human footprints all over this landscape.
How did the dynamics on the bus change when some of the wives joined the trip back?
At one point, it got all couples. At one point, there were 14 of us on the bus, 7 men and 7 women. Lots of them were married, but not to the person that they were coupling with. I remember one morning we woke up and everybody was fucking. The whole bus was shaking.
Y'all the one. You're the one.
You're the one.
It got a lot heavier on the way back. That was fervor pitch stuff. I think I talked with Kesey about our fucking strange situation. The thing was weird, man, but you couldn't be mad at him. He was really compassionate. I liked sensuous, and that was the most difficult part, is having been lovers, not being lovers anymore, and continuing to be friends.
I can't get you out of my mind.
The thing that creates problems in all those husband-wife triangle situations is everybody's hang-up with their own attachment to some kind of belief of the way it ought to be.
I came through Yellowstone Park with this bus. I saw a sign that said, "Beware of the bear." And something clicked when I saw this, and I thought, there's the problem. There's the whole hang-up that stops me from writing, stops people from singing, stops people from living. Beware of the bear. What did that used to mean? It used to mean be aware of the bear. Now it means be scared of him. This little piece of knowledge, and you can plug it into any person who is now being hassled with the way the world is changing. Goldwater and his bunch are scared.
That extremism in the defense of liberty is no vice.
There's something happening that is scaring these people, which means that something is happening that's so new, they're scared beyond any powers of reasoning.
0. These are the stakes. To make a world in which all of God's children can live, or to go into the dark. We must either love each other, or we must die.
Vote for President Johnson on November 3rd. The stakes are too high for you to stay home.
All the themes of my work have to do with America. Traveling across this land, coming to this edge, and then what?
My membranes have passed into an oxidation state.
After we got back to La Honda, after the bus trip, we had a very purposeful ritual to get out from under this bus thing. We took all of our bus clothes and put them in a pile and set fire to them because I wanted to be done with it. I wanted to get back to business. I had books to write, kids to raise, but it wouldn't die. People just kept coming around.
Like little jackrabbits gaily crossing the pasture that morning. So.
What happened with us, we were making that movie, and pretty soon on Saturdays when we showed it, people were coming to see what it was.
And the red barn and the kids on the beach in the stream saying...
We really didn't project it until I'd finished editing it, reel to reel, in chronological order, and we showed it from beginning to end without stopping, so 30 hours straight. And so for part of it, everybody slept through it, of course. Cassidy, of course, he took speed, was awake, and was the one who ended up running the projector and talking very softly. And now we're coming to New York, enjoying every second of it. But he was the only one awake. Absolutely everybody was asleep.
He's babbling just like he always
He's out of his
has.
nuts.
Every Saturday, they'd come around more and more because we would do these Saturday night trips. And finally, there were just too many coming around. So I realized, I got to get this out of my house because otherwise I'm going to be cleaning up all week long for the rest of my life. So we just said, okay, next time we're going to do this in Santa Cruz at Babs's house, which was really the beginning of the acid tests. And after that, he said, I don't want it in my place. He said, okay, next time we'll do it in San Jose. So each time we just said, next week on Saturday, it'll be happening there.
I'm flying down deserted streets, wrapped in mother's wine and cheese, asbestos boots on flaming feet, dreaming of forbidden trees, wearing uniforms on nighttime beats.
When we started doing the acid test, we took on the Dead as sort of our backup band.
We'd heard about Kesey and the Bus. They've been doing outrageous things for quite a while and had a reputation for it. And for us, it seemed like a real interesting thing to go and check out.
Well, someone's trying to tell me where it's at.
And they were our first and best audience. The Pranksters were, you know, they were the first ones to get off on us.
Leather wings like a vampire bat. I fly away to my cold water flight and eat my way.
They weren't just playing what was on the music sheets, they were playing what was in the air. When the Dead are at their best, the vibrations that are stirred up by the audience is the music that they play. That means that the band has to be supple enough to really read the notes written on the wall.
They say I've begun to lose my grip. My hold on reality's starting to slip. Tell me to get off of this trip. They say that it's like a sinking ship.
It moved on from that exponentially, from one place to another place.
I've been set free.
LSD is a really groovy way to find out more about the things around you.
LSD helps me understand the whole world better.
LSD helps you to understand your own mind.
Once Pandora's box is open, you can't regulate who gets to use the stuff that flies out of it.
Well, I'm terribly frightened by the problem with LSD. I think there's been a great deal of misinformation
by those who seem to see no harm in it. But as a parent and as a citizen, and certainly now in this position, I am greatly concerned.
A powerful new drug capable of producing weird and dangerous hallucinations had found its way onto the streets. We had to try and stop it.
The government said, stop that experiment. All these guinea pigs that we've sent up there into outer space, bring them back down, and don't ever let them go back up there again, because we don't like the look in their eyes.
He's clean, Joe.
Creation,
except
reality.
for these. Those sugar cubes. I'll make you book he's been dropping that acid we've been hearing about.
Evil! Evil! Evil!
All right, come on, son. Settle down.
Hospital people, whether they want to or not, are becoming expert in the handling of LSD users in trouble.
Some people have a bad experience the first time they take the drug. Others take it 30, 60, or even 100 times before their bad trip. And the bad trip? Instant insanity. Often a never-never land of no return.
No, get away.
Some others who take LSD will have even more tragic freakouts. Many lose all contact with reality. Some forget what height means, and in a turned-on or euphoric state, step or attempt to fly from cliffs and high windows with real-life, permanent, non-psychedelic results. Other trippers attempt to merge their beings with large, vast automobiles.
With all the hype about LSD, you were busted with marijuana?
It wasn't even grass charges. It was being in a place where marijuana was.
Mr. Kesey, do you feel you did something wrong?
I feel like you only come to this movie once, and if you don't get something rewarding out of every minute you're sitting there, then you're blowing your ticket.
Let's assume the worst. Supposing they do come back with conviction, would you appeal?
If I could just concede in some way and let them stick me in jail and do my time, I would do it and save the taxpayers and everybody else a lot of trouble.
The aim of the sheriff and the probation department has been to rehabilitate Mr. Kesey, to get him back into writing, back into the career where he seems to have the most talent.
Walking young in the morning to my honey.
In 6 months, your kids grow a lot. That's what they take away from you in jail. That's a drag. I don't want to ever go to jail.
You didn't hear no baby cry today.
One flew out of a cuckoo's nest today. That is if you consider jail a cuckoo's nest. Federal charges were dropped, and the last obstacle, San Francisco bail, was set at $3,500 plus penalties. Kesey will be back in court November 9th, hopefully. In the meantime, he will tell the teenage world of the evils of drugs and probably describe a long trip.
Are you repudiating LSD and other hallucinatory drugs?
There's enough LSD around now and enough young kids around who are able to manufacture this that it's impossible for the police to do anything about it.
You think this new law is turning them off, then?
I don't know that you can turn them off, but I think you may be able to move them on.
Do you consider yourself becoming one of us squares, perhaps?
God, I hope not.
The commencement exercises for LSDU will be held on Monday night. That's Halloween. And, of course, the man who is going to be passing out the diplomas is Ken Kesey. Well, Ken, what's the theme of this commencement exercise?
Trick or treat. When I first proposed the idea to Jerry Garcia, the leader of the Grateful Dead, who's playing up there now, that it's time to graduate from acid, he says, hallelujah.
If
was a test, and there were people that passed and there were people that didn't pass. I mean, we gave out diplomas for people that we felt like really had passed it.
Are you a member of the graduating class tonight?
No, I flunked the acid test.
How do you go about doing that?
Well, the stipulations that Ken put up, I didn't pass.
We went wild for a while. We went wild because we'd been caged up for 50,000 years. We went wild and found out there was more than we had been led to believe. And now, unless we start finding the little piece of it that we could call the reins, it's going to get away from us. This doesn't necessarily mean you stop taking acid, but you stop repeating the trips. Every head knows that he takes a drug to eventually stop taking it. And I think that it's time for a great number of them to stop. I believe that drugs have now become a fashion.
The hate scene has changed, all right. The flower not only is wilted, it's dead.
Going to leave this broke down palace on my hands and my knees. I will roll, roll, roll.
The hippies is often a strange world in which they live in. They take many trips. And the trip of the hippies is generally an unusual one. And marijuana, of course, with LSD, is being used.
All of these drugs were being fed into the culture by the CIA.
The LSD was not the whole story.
I didn't believe it for a long time. Well, Allen Ginsberg says, you know who was paying for that? It was the CIA. I said, oh, no, Allen, you're just paranoid. But he finally got all the records, and it did turn out the CIA was doing this, and it wasn't being done to try to cure insane people, which is what we thought. It was being done to weaken people and to be able to put them under the control of interrogators.
I was so naive. I believed these doctors knew what they were doing. You know, this is the American government. How could they make a mistake?
Listen to the river sing sweet songs to rock my soul.
We finally got out of jail. We were perfectly willing to leave the whole area down there, which offered excitement, but no stability.
It's funny, in your prankster days, you were seen as being part of a group that had made such a break with the past. And yet here you are living on a family farm. You're, I believe, still married to the woman who you've been married to since, was it 1956?
Long time, yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, there's been this incredible continuity in your life between past and present in a lot of ways.
Yeah. My wife and I met in junior high, and all of our families are still very close. This schism between this one consciousness and this consciousness, I believe, has been arbitrarily forced on us. I've always been a fairly reliable, straight up the middle of the road citizen that just happens to be an acid head.
Ken's a born leader. I mean, he's just got charisma coming out of his ears. Cassidy was not that kind of person. He really wasn't. Once he didn't have the bus to drive or a function, he was really like a liability. You've heard the stories about him and Ann Murphy. Oh, don't you know this? Oh, God. They were on a heavy sadomasochist trip. I'm really old-fashioned when it comes to stuff like that. I don't think a relationship is worth jack shit if you're not making things good and happy. Compare this with Ken and Faye. They've been good for each other. See, they take care of each other. They don't let each other just go downhill and get more and more fucked up. On the contrary, they take good care of each other.
Were you surprised to learn that Cassidy was found dead beside the railroad tracks in Mexico?
When he died, I felt like that he'd accidentally killed himself on purpose. I can picture myself in his shoes exactly. And there's no place else to go, really. Might as well meet the angels.
Did you decide to give up the kind of prankster's life? The story that I've heard is the pranksters went to Woodstock. You didn't want to go. And when they came back to a sign hung in your driveway that just said, no.
Well, there were 61 people when they headed out to Woodstock, and after they were gone, I went upstairs, and we live in a barn. At that time, there was still hay in the loft of the barn. And I found out one of these little hippie warrens where they dug in with their ratty old sleeping bags and their copy of Zap magazine, and stuck right down in the hay bale was a candle, which had burned right down to the hay before it had gone off. And I thought, there's certain things that take precedent over enlightenment.
And that's when you send everybody home, basically.
Yeah.
How much writing have you been doing over the past few years?
Oh, quite a lot. I write all the time. I just don't publish that much.
I've got 4 kids, and there's a lot of the same energy that goes into raising a family, that goes into putting a book together like Notion. Once you get a lot of stuff in the air, you can't stop, because you'll forget it. And that kind of consciousness I have not had, and I think it's because, I'm running a big farm. That's what occupies my mind. Either that, or I fried my marbles, just like everybody thinks.
When people ask me what I think my best work is, I always say the bus. Novels are a dime a dozen, but there's only one bus further.
What it meant was that everybody had to consider a new way for things to be. Don't you know that we're all one? The deeper I got into it, the more I realized it was a different force working. The only big mistake we ever made as a force was thinking for a while that we were going to win. We developed vested interests in the victory to come. We begin to parcel off into little groups, whether it's feminism or politics, for money, religion. Whatever it is, everybody is jumping up and down in front of it until nobody can see it clear anymore. Now, if we'd never made that mistake, we'd been way ahead, and this is kind of why I'm retiring from the ranks.
There's something about what we're doing is that we're meant to lose every time. You make these forays, you write these books, you perform this music, but the big juggernaut of civilization continues and you get kind of brushed to the side. But I think all through history there's been these kind of divine losers that just take a deep breath and go ahead, knowing that society is not going to understand it, and not even caring because they're having a good time.
Sometimes the light's all shining on me. Other times I can barely see. Lately it occurs to me what a long, strange trip it's been.
Trucking, got my chips cashed in. Keep trucking, like the doodah man.
together, more or less in line. Just keep trucking on.
Arrows of neon and flashing marquees out on Main Street. Chicago, New York, Detroit, and it's all on the same street. A typical city involved in a typical daydream. Hang it up and see what tomorrow brings.
Dallas got a soft machine. Houston, too close to New Orleans. New York got the ways and means and just won't let you be.
Most of the cats that you meet on the street speak of true love. Most of the time they're sitting and crying at home. One of these days they know they gotta get going. Out of the door and down to the street all alone.
Chugging like a doodah man once told me you got to pay your hand. Sometimes the cards ain't worth a dime if you don't lay them down. Sometimes the light's all shining on me. Other times I can barely see. Lately it occurs to me what a long, strange trip it's been. Trucking, I'm going home. Whoa, whoa, baby, that's where I belong. Back home, sit down and patch my bones and get back trucking.